Hello and welcome to Taiwan Talks. I'm Ian Kavat. A Chinese Navy ship has once again come dangerously close to a Philippine Coast Guard vessel on its way to resupplying a military outpost on Second Thomas Shoal.
We condemn the behavior of the Chinese Coast Guard vessel. They have been violating the international law, particularly the collision regulations, since they have carried out dangerous maneuver and blocking operations to the Philippine Coast Guard to prevent our routine operation in providing supply for our military troops.
With me to discuss this are Stephen Tan, International Policy Advisory Group Managing Director, and Chen Ping-kuei, National Chengchi University Department of Diplomacy Associate Professor. Stephen Ping-kuei, a very warm welcome to the show today. The Philippine Coast Guard ship was on its way on Wednesday, October the 4th to resupply and rotate the crew on the Sierra Madre, intentionally grounded on McLain Shoal, when it was intercepted at a distance of just 1 meter, according to the Philippine Coast Guard. Stephen, let me come to you first. It's half a nautical mile or 1 meter apart. It's all just too close, isn't it? Do you think this is just simply irresponsible?
Absolutely it is. This is too close, and this is a very, very dangerous move. And I think China did this for reasons. You see geopolitical tensions around the whole world. Now the South China Sea, the escalated tension for the past few years in the South China Sea seems to be cooling down. But at that moment, I think China obviously took the initiative to escalate the tensions, particularly between the Philippines, knowing that under President Marcos of the Philippines, the country's relationship with the United States has been getting closer and closer over the past 12 to 18 months, whereas the relationship between the Philippines and China are moving apart a little bit. Now, what's going on here is not by accident. I believe that it's an intentional move and strategic move made by China. To tackle on not just the Philippines, but sending a clear signal to the neighboring countries, including Vietnam, and also particularly mainly aiming at the United States.
Professor Chen, intentional move, that's what Stephen says, and coincides with what Jay Tarriela says, a maritime affairs expert. He says that, that China wants to provoke essentially a false flag operation. So they want the Philippines to be provoked, and then they can then come in with drastic, perhaps violent action. What's your assessment of that?
I think it is indeed a possibility, but if this is really what China conspired to do, at least we will see some military preparation in advance. So if China is preparing to provoke a larger conflict and escalate a small dispute to a conflict, then we should see more supply ships in the South China Sea. We should see more transfer of weapon and personnel. So, and
so
we're
not seeing this.
Yeah, we're not seeing this. So I think this is a I would say not new, but regular move that Chinese Coast Guard would do to neighboring countries. We have seen very similar things in East China Sea. So the report says the distance is pretty close this time, right? This is not the first time that Filipino Coast Guard are being intercepted by Chinese Coast Guard. It's just we have a better report on this time. So I think this is not something new, but this is something we have to pay attention, because China seems to strengthen its pressure on the Second Thomas Shoal, and Second Thomas Shoal become a target right now. So I think we will see China to intercept more supply ship in the future.
So you think it's more of the same, Stephen? Though you think it's something a bit different. Is it change?
Well, yeah. Let me just add on something real quick. I think it's very clear that China is sending political signal or message to this region and the rest of the world. But
can I just to add on to you? I think it's your argument. Let's look back. We've had the military grade laser. This is all this year. Okay, buoys from last year, water cannon, floating barrier, dangerous intercepts. All of this appears to be building up.
Right. So I think Well, you have to make a distinction between the military signal and message leading to a potential and prospective military actions on one hand, and the political signal and political message, reinforcing its position and showing the strength in order to prepare for something else on the other. Those are the two separate, related, connected, but different concepts. Now, I'm more leaning towards the latter, which is it's more political driven,
Okay.
and
So
by
you
sending
disagree
the
with Jay
political, political signals instead of or as opposed to preparing for in the near future a military action.
Okay,
Yeah,
Professor Chen.
I agree with him too. I think this is a very important signal to a neighboring country, especially to Vietnam, I think.
Because of the upgraded relationship with the US.
Yes. So it is a warning to the neighboring country that China will use these kind of tactics to secure its sovereignty, secure its security interest. So other neighbors should not increase their activities in the neighborhood. They should not try to fortify their territories and their controlled island.
Let's move on to Chinese Foreign Ministry, which has said there was, of course, the Chinese floating barrier to the Second Thomas Shoal, which the Philippine Coast Guard cut, and Chinese Foreign Ministry has said it is cutting it was a hazard to navigation and a clear violation of international law. What the Philippines did looks like nothing more than self-amusement. Stephen, what do you make of these comments?
Well, it's just political rhetorics. I think it does nothing but reinforcing Chinese position on the territory claimed in the South China Sea, and this is nothing new, and the rest of the world knows it and disagree with it, particularly the Philippines, the Vietnams, and also many other countries, including Australia, and particularly the United States. Now, China has claimed that 90% of the international water in the South China Sea, it's its own territory, and that is simply not the position, to say at least, of the neighboring countries in the South China Sea as well as the United States.
Professor Chen, I just want to go back a little bit to the statement, that this is a hazard to navigation, the cutting of the floating barrier, and a clear violation of international law.
Yeah,
Any substance to this?
I don't think that this is fully understood by the foreign ministry speaker. Maybe he or she is referring to a different scenario, because putting a barrier inside the water is a hazard to navigation, right? So, and country, whether it is legal or not to put such barrier depends on whether it is located within the territory water or whether you have a jurisdiction of this water. So it is not a violation of international law. So, and if it is a violation of international law, then China can try to appeal to the court, right, to resolve the dispute. So obviously this is just rhetoric, just like this is just like a standard Chinese official response to this kind of issue.
Okay, so China has, as Stephen said, claims 90% of the South China Sea. It's also recently claimed that the Second Thomas Shoal has never belonged to the Philippines. In relation to the ruling by the Permanent Court of Arbitration, it stated the arbitration initiated by the Philippines directly concerns the issues of territorial sovereignty and maritime delimitation. Territorial issues are not subject to the United Nations Convention of the Law of the Sea, which is UNCLOS. Besides, in 2006, pursuant to this Article 298 of UNCLOS, China excluded issues relating to sea boundary delimitations from the jurisdiction of a court or tribunal. Stephen, you're a lawyer specializing in international law. Can you help us interpret this?
Well, this has always been Chinese position, that this territorial dispute is not subject to the jurisdiction of the arbitration, permanent arbitration court or the tribunal. Now, in 2016, or prior to the arbitration award came out, China had taken that position and did not appear in the arbitration. and did not recognize the jurisdiction over that, and that position has never changed. But you have to know that the international law or permanent arbitration panel or the law of the sea, all in all, there's a limit to that. I think underneath is still the powers, the international powers and the regional powers in the struggling and the power struggles in between and among the various international powers. Now, China has been playing a tough ball in that, using the legal reasoning to not participate in any international law forum to adjudicate the territorial dispute in the South China Sea. And that's understandable because China believes, actually it is, a power, a great power internationally. So China's been trying to use every method and every way to exert its influence and power everywhere, including the South China Sea, without resorting to the international law or its arbitration panel. And then the United States has taken a totally different approach by resorting to the commonly recognized international arbitration or a way of trying to solve the problems, and then by the same token taking its firm position that it is international water and certain behaviors are simply not acceptable. So you see there is a big distinctions, not just between the United States and China, not just the legal positioning, but also approaches to deal with the international issues, particularly the issues concerning the international law of the sea in the South China Sea.
Okay, I mean, it was the Philippines that took this case to the permanent court,
exactly.
rather than the US.
Exactly. But the United States, stand by the Philippines in the legal position and also the stance of the Filipinos' claim of territory.
Okay, Professor Chen. I mean, the fact is also, though, that China and the Philippines and many other countries are party to UNCLOS, and China was actually at the table when these rules were being laid out, and it signed up to the fact that countries should have EEZs, which is the economic.
That's according to UNCLOS.
That's right, 200 nautical miles. So this does actually belong to the Philippines, under UNCLOS.
When the EEZ can overlap, right? They can easily overlap. So it would depends on the negotiation and between the parties to decide whether they can share the EEZ or a split.
But is there Chinese territory there that would overlap with the second chop?
But the problem here is not it's exactly that, whether there is a Chinese territory inside South China Sea. So the ruling actually claims that all the features in South China Sea are not territories. They cannot be part of a territory, right? So that's the whole issue. The arbitration in 2012 is about whether China can claim any piece of land in South China Sea, and the ruling says no. So there's no EEZ issue then. Yeah. But even if the ruling says that, all the countries they try to get a piece, right? They try to get a piece of that.
When you say there's no EEZ issue there, you mean for China?
For China.
Right.
Yeah.
So
just to be clear, that if there is no territory in the South China Sea, then there's no 200 miles.
That's right.
Outside of that territory, that claimed territory. So there's no issue.
Yeah.
So China cannot dispute the Philippines' claim.
Yeah. And well, but that also negates this Philippines claim as well. So a lot of features, Philippine claims would not be islands, and they cannot have territorial waters too, right? But in West Philippine Sea, there is a long distance amount, a big territory of water that can be identified as Philippines EEZ. Now China claims part of it is his. Yeah.
Okay, we'll have to leave that discussion there, unfortunately. To find out more about what China is doing in the West Philippine Sea, my next guest is geopolitical analyst and author Don McLain Gill. He's a lecturer at Salle University at the Department of International Studies. I spoke to him earlier.
We have China in this point in time looking towards how far it could go in provoking and altering the status quo without triggering a shooting war and triggering any form of defense guarantees under the Mutual Defense Treaty between the Philippines and the United States. I know this comes at a time when the Philippines has renewed its commitment in more effectively engaging and strengthening its relationship with the United States and Japan and Australia. So China is being a calculative power of trying to rearrange the geographical architecture and to eventually reorient and shift the regional balance of power to its favor without triggering any shooting war. And this is because it has been incorporating what I'd like to call a salami slicing strategy, bit by bit, using a bunch of strategies, including hard power, soft power, sharp power, in order to achieve this particular goal. And it has been quite effective in altering the status quo to its favor since the 1990s. And we've seen this in 2012 as well towards the Philippines and even in the East China Sea. China has been doing that quite effectively.
Who do you think has the upper hand?
So the challenge here is for the Philippines and the US, and of course the extended system with Japan and Australia, to address such salami slicing activities, to apply more cost on China's gray zone maneuvers, because these are the short to mid-term threats that have serious consequences for countries like the Philippines. In fact, based on a RAND study in 2022, the Philippines is in fact one of the most critical victims of Chinese gray zone activities. So the need for Manila to work with its partners to achieve this and to address this is crucial. And we've seen this based on Manila's intent to broadcast publicly the atrocities committed by China and the Chinese Coast Guard in the West Philippine Sea by bringing in journalists on board the Philippine Coast Guard vessels, because such salami slicing activities often happen when a country is isolated. So I think Manila recognizes this threat and it seeks to address this more effectively. But of course, much work needs to be done.
I'd like to get your view on the fact that Manila is eyeing a defense pact with Japan, and it will be similar to the visiting forces agreement that the Philippines has with the US and Australia.
Yeah, this is absolutely significant. And in fact, this complements the whole initiative of bringing all four countries together. Especially in terms of security cooperation. This would allow the functional gap of the hub and spoke system to significantly decrease and allow all four countries to more effectively transition towards a more collective approach in dealing with various traditional and non-traditional security issues. So the Philippines has it with the US, it has a visiting forces agreement with Australia, and having one with Japan, this would also be crucial towards the overarching goal of maintaining the rules-based order amidst revisionist forces.
That was geopolitical analyst Don McLain Gill speaking to me from Manila, ending there with a possible Philippine defense pact with Japan similar to that already Manila has forged with Australia. Now, Ping-kuei, if I can ask you about the trip that Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida is meant to be visiting the Philippines to boost that security cooperation, and China's Global Times, the CCP mouthpiece, has obviously criticized him. They've called Japan increasingly divisive and destructive in the Asia-Pacific region. Can you interpret that for us?
So to be more specific, it should be a defense agreement, or maybe multiple agreement instead of a pact.
Okay.
We probably will not see a treaty, but we will see a lot of agreements about
similar
defense.
to the Australian.
Right,
yeah.
right.
Okay.
But so the Chinese comment on Kishida's possible visit, this is something I would say something new in terms of relations between Japan and Philippines, because in the past, Japan has a lot of relations with Southeast Asian countries and South Asia countries, and usually these relations, when Japan try to promote trade relations or security cooperations, anti-terrorist cooperations, China doesn't have too much to say about it. But this time, it is pretty clear that Kishida's visit can produce a security agreement that can put China in a worse position. So it seems like Chinese officials react to that pretty
quite sharply.
Allow me just add something quick. I think Kishida administration has every incentive to take more of a leadership role in this region, in Indo-Pacific and beyond. And this is being encouraged by not just Washington, but also Manila and the neighboring countries. So that makes China a little bit more nervous than before. Now, this is not historic. Yes, this has been done before, but the Prime Minister of Japan, visiting the Philippines, and with the view of entering into various different defense-related strategic agreements, and that itself means a lot to this region.
Now, it echoes the visit by Australian Prime Minister, though, Anthony Albanese.
Well, exactly. Right? And then, of course, previously, the Vice President Kamala Harris of the United States. So I mentioned that earlier before, that the Philippines is strategically much more important than before. And that means that it's more important both in terms of U.S. and its allies, but also to China. So this is part of the tension, escalated tensions between China and the rest of the world, or to say at least between the United States and China. And then, of course, the Philippines has never had the intention to get stuck in the middle, and the Philippines has its own sovereign and territorial claims, and it's a fully independent sovereign country, has its own national interests, but it's just that its national interests coincide with the rest of the world and vis-a-vis China, so that makes it even more important than before.
Absolutely. Now, back to the hub of the hub and spoke a security arrangement in the Asia Pacific. During a U.S. congressional hearing, U.S. Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for South and Southeast Asia, Lindsay Ford, commended the Philippines' action and reaffirmed Washington's security commitments to its Asian allies. She said, "The department has been incredibly clear that when it comes to our treaty commitments to the Philippines, we believe in an armed attack against Philippine armed forces, public vessels, aircraft apply to the South China Sea, and that includes the Philippine Coast Guard." Professor Chen, China again has chided the US for its provocations in response to this. And we could ask the question, who is it that's provoking who? Don McLain Gill, in his interview with me, talked about the need to increase the cost on China for its actions. So is there a way, do you think, that we could move into, imposing a cost on China's grey zone activities?
I think so far the most effective way, and a lot of countries are trying, is to boost Filipinos' capability. So if Japan reached a defense agreement with Philippines, so that will increase their defense cooperation, and you can imagine the Philippine Coast Guard and military will get new vessels, and they will get new equipments that can launch countermeasure against Chinese vessels. And I will have to emphasize that this is a battle between the Coast Guards, not militaries.
But the Navy is involved too,
Navy
right?
is involved in the latter period. So if the conflict escalates, navies can jump in. However, so far the Chinese are using Coast Guard and very heavily armed Coast Guards to interrupt and harass Filipino supply ship, right? So and fishing ship as well. So the Philippines needs to boost its Coast Guard capabilities. Because judging from what we have seen so far, the capability difference is large between China and Philippines. In
so
terms
larger
of Coast
vessels,
Guard.
better armed.
Yeah. In terms of water cannon, you can see the difference.
Sure.
Right.
Stephen, very last question. We've got about 30 seconds left. So the Philippines is once again considering taking China to the Permanent Court of Arbitration, this time for alleged coral harvesting and destruction of reefs in the West Philippine Sea. So tell us, from a legal point of view, what element does this environmental damage add to the Philippines' case against China? Is it stronger?
Well, this is something relatively new. We need to, explore that, whether environmental damage is as part of the subject of the territorial claim that leads to the Permanent Court of Arbitration. And I would expect the Chinese will continue to take its position as it did previously in denial, and we will see the development. But let me just add something real quick. Ling Xifor is a very veteran diplomat, and this is in her turf. The Coast Guard is part of the treaty commitment. That's loud and clear. So that is, I'm not sure it's the first time, but this is loud and clear that the attack on Coast Guard of the Philippines is subject to the U.S.-Philippines Joint Defense Treaty, and that is a loud and clear statement. Whether or not that will be a further escalation remains to be seen.
So water cannon is not an armed attack, obviously.
Well, it's not.
But it's borderline.
But it's close enough. It's borderline and
gray zone.
Yeah, it's gray zone, and it's subject to interpretations by various parties.
Yes. Okay, we're going to have to wrap it up there. Thank you so much, Stephen Tan and Chen Ping-kuei, for joining Taiwan Talks today. If you liked our show, please search for us on YouTube, give us a thumbs up and hit subscribe to our channel. Thank you for watching our show today. Stay safe and see you next time.